Okay, let's just jump right into a big question. What if that feeling of freedom your smartphone gives you, what if it's actually an illusion? Today, we're going to explore a pretty provocative idea that we might all be living in a new digital feudal system.
Just think about this for a second. Imagine a world where your digital life isn't just monitored, but owned. That's a really heavy thought, isn't it? But that single idea, it's the key to everything we're about to unpack here. So this leads to a pretty bold question, but it's one we've got to ask. Could your favorite apps, the ones you scroll through every single day, could they actually be a new kind of serfdom?
To even begin to answer that, we have to look at this huge paradox, what you could call the alluring cage of convenience. Our devices, they promise us endless freedom, but is that what they're really delivering?
Because you see, beneath those slick, beautiful interfaces, a new power structure is quietly being built. So let's pull back that curtain and see exactly how similar today's tech giants are to the feudal lords of the past.
Right, so to really get this whole analogy, we've got to do a super quick history lesson. What exactly was feudalism anyway?
It pretty much boiled down to three core pillars. First, land ownership. The powerful, the kings and lords, they owned everything, all the land. Second, service. Serfs worked that land, and in return they got a place to live and protection. And third, and this is absolutely crucial, a lack of mobility. The serfs were literally tied to the land. They couldn't just leave. These 3 points are the key to this whole comparison.
Okay, so you've got the history. Now for the really interesting part. Let's map that old system onto our digital world and see just how well it fits. It's kind of spooky.
So here's the first big connection. Back then, you had feudal lords who owned all the physical land, while today, we have a tech aristocracy that owns all the digital real estate. We're talking the platforms, the networks, the operating systems, the very ground our digital world is built on. And just like physical land was the source of all wealth and power back in the day, today's land is the platform itself. It's become the essential ground where our digital lives happen. All our communication, our shopping, our culture, it all takes place there. And here's the most, challenging piece of the analogy. The serfs who worked the land, the ones providing the labor, in this new system, that's us. As users and creators, we are the ones working the digital land. And what do we provide? Its most valuable resources, our data, our content, and our engagement.
So, how does this whole system actually work? How does it keep us in place and, extract value? Let's take a look at how the walls of this digital manor are closing in on us.
Let's just make this personal for a second. Think about your own digital stuff. Do you really own those photos you posted or that list of friends you spent years building up? I mean, if you actually read the terms of service, the answer is a lot more complicated than you might think. It all comes down to that now famous insight. If the service is free, you aren't the customer. You are the product. Your attention, your clicks, your data, that's the harvest that gets sold to the real customers, the advertisers.
And these are the modern ties that bind us to the land. Digital vassalage. That's the fact that they make it almost impossible to just move your followers to a new platform. Then there's digital enclosure, which is how the open web is being replaced by these monetized walled gardens. And algorithmic control, which means a creator's entire livelihood can literally vanish overnight because of some secret update.
This whole analogy gets very, very real when you look at something called gig serfdom. Think about rideshare drivers or delivery workers. They're called independent contractors, right? But they are completely dependent on one single app for their work, for how much they get paid, and for all the rules. They have almost zero power to negotiate. Wow. So if that's the diagnosis, what's the cure? Is there a way out of this? Well, the source material we're looking at suggests a few possible paths toward, for lack of a better word, emancipation. So, there are basically 3 big ideas on the table. First, real data portability. And I don't just mean downloading your photos. I mean the legal right and the actual tech to seamlessly move your entire social network, your friends, your followers, to a competitor. That would create real choice. Second, decentralization, which you might know as Web 3. This is the most radical idea, building a whole new internet where users are the owners, not the product. It's a huge challenge, but the goal is to break the system entirely. And third, regulation. This means we start treating the biggest platforms like essential public utilities, demanding transparency in their algorithms and a duty of fairness to the people who depend on them.
At the end of the day, the argument is that we need a fundamental shift in how we think about all this. We have to stop seeing these platforms as just fun companies and start seeing them for what they've become, new forms of structural power that are literally shaping our entire society.
And that leaves us with one simple, powerful, and maybe kind of uncomfortable question. After everything we've just talked about, do we want to be their serfs?